Good evening. You're listening live to the Xtreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob, broadcasting to you from the Pine Hills Palace, just west of Orlando, Florida. I also have from Central Florida the young Gen Z Professor Pixel out around Disney's area. Pixels, from what I understand where you're at. And I'm obviously a little bit north of you here in Orlando, and it's a very balmy 84 degrees out here. We got another hurricane coming up in a couple weeks, and I thought, even though Halloween just finished up here on the Extreme Movie Show, and while we covered a lot of different slasher films, Gallo films, Hammer horror films, which we're going to conclude tonight with The Revenge of Frankenstein at 7 p.m. Eastern. I thought we should honor the horror franchise by saying what movie is very pivotal, what's one of the best horror movies of all time, and that, of course, is tonight's flick, 1968, I believe, Rosemary's Baby. And to me, this movie is great for a couple quick reasons. We're just doing a quick little reaction. I know it's a first-time watch for you. I've watched it a few times in my life. Not for a long while, though, actually, so it'll be interesting to talk about it here in a moment. This movie is friggin' fantastic. And if you are a horror fan of any type of film, any sort of genre in horror, whether it's torture porn, whether it's slasher, whether it's comedy, which to me doesn't exist, as we know, you've got to see this film. Not only is this an outstanding film, it accomplishes what I think is a very difficult task, and that was taking horror movies and modernizing and putting them in everyday life. Where else can you find occultism, a woman having a baby by Satan, except for in a high-rise building in New York City in the late 60s? It's fantastic. Roman Polanski film, great director, book by Era 11, phenomenal. A-plus movie to me, and hear that. But enough about me. Let's talk about you. You're the young one here. I'm really curious about what you think about this film for your initial reaction.
Okay. If anybody's been on this channel for a while, I try to bring up one show as much as possible because of my absolute love of it, and that is Dark Shadows. And something that really just kicks off the occult phase of that era, that show is one of them. It just dives right into it. And to go ahead, and I've never seen this movie. I didn't even know what it was really about, other than Rosemary's Baby. But it's insane that I've lived this long on this earth and I've not seen this film, because it was fantastic. I go ahead and rag on A24 and their cult films. And there's a reason for that. I don't like how they're being portrayed. I don't like how things are coming to us in those movies. But when it comes to this, it is terrifying to see this woman's life just be completely taken over. Just it seems like all at once, but it's slow. I mean, it's what? How long's the movie? 2 hours and 16 minutes,
Yes.
and it just flies right by. I was looking at the clock because I just finished the movie 5 minutes ago, and it's insane just how wonderful this movie is able to go ahead and tell this story over a time of, I guess, 9 months, but it doesn't feel like that. And it's not in a bad way, like let's do a time jump here, let's skip this part. It all feels very natural, and that is what makes this movie so damn perfect.
Yeah, obviously Roman Polanski's been around for a very long time. His name is on many phenomenal films, regardless of the subject matter or anything else there. You definitely go, wow, this is, you can see where films should go, or B level and C level, and how they compare to something like this. You're like, okay, I get it. I was a huge fan of The Ninth Gate back in the late 90s. We've covered that here on the Extreme Movie Show. And of course, he's done Chinatown, a few other films as well that we'll be getting to at some point eventually. But I just wanted to touch a little bit here on Rosemary's Baby because, again, modernizing horror, how do you do it? I mean, a lot of people praise Hitchcock for being a great director because he'll show you, as the old expression goes, the bomb under the table, and so you know what's going on, and you get like the everyman kind of thrown in a very atypical situation, how they have to deal with it, which is kind of cool. What I like a lot about this film here is that there's really no surprises, there's no secrets, everything is right in front of you from the very beginning. Within 5 to 10 minutes of the film, we see them getting in their apartment, we hear about all the bad things that are happening. We see that, oh, that looks like there's a door behind behind this hutch or whatever. And it's like, yeah, you're right. What for? And of course, that comes into play later. And I think one of the more interesting things to me about this film was not necessarily the cult aspect to it. I'm being general with my descriptions here in case anybody hasn't seen it. I really like watching her, Rosemary, and what she goes through, because she's a young woman. She's with a man that's not right for her, in my opinion, and it comes across that way. And Cassavetes, the actor, always got a lot of shit for, acting like he wasn't very good. But that was kind of the whole point. He's a major part of the film without you feeling like he is. That's all I'm going to
Yep.
say. And I'm trying to be spoiler free, which normally I'm not. But I loved watching her transition from the point you said where the older couple takes a strong, keen interest in her. The whole natural late 60s spiritual earth movement, hippie dippy movement coming up here in the States, which is really just an extension of stuff that would go over in Europe. Her taking smoothies and eschewing modern medicine. It was kind of an interesting take, seeing different doctors in there with their ideas. But damn it, the paranoia just ratchets it up with this film to the point where when she gets pregnant, and she starts losing weight. I'm like, oh, that's disgusting, and that's one of those things about women having a child is, that's when they're the most beautiful and they're glowing, their skin's vibrant. It's just, it's a life sort of thing. And here you go,
It's
God,
wrong.
it's disgusting. It is. And you know what? It's not like it's CGI or these hardcore practical effects. They're in just basically a soundstage, really, right? I mean, and,
Yeah.
and you feel like you're in this really nice, extreme high level place in New York City, right across from the park, and yet here's this young, beautiful woman that gets married. They have a child, or they're working on it. They might have a couple of them. The husband starts getting some positive things in his life, so everything's looking good for the family, except for the actual pain part of it. And I'll say this: one of my favorite scenes in here, one of the that stands out, I should say, is towards the end of the movie when she's not feeling very well at all, and there's this big house party and she gets not trapped, but she ends up going to a room with some of the other females in there because they're all happy. Another girl's getting ready to have a child. Hey, we're all celebrating it. That's all. It's like we all scored a touchdown, and they're in there going, "Wait a minute, you've been feeling a pain in your gut since November, and they're in the new year. What's wrong? And who's your doctor? And why would you?" And all the girls just kind of rally around her and all that too. And you're like, "How's this going to end?" And all I'm going to say is that there's definitely a strong feminist vibe to this movie in a good way, because you see her become a bit assertive towards the end of the movie as it goes on. You see a radical change in her persona as far as the way she chooses to dress and everything else. And a part of you goes, oh my God, is she just really giving into everybody around her? That, the pressure of family to have a kid, all of society's roles that as a woman you get shoehorned into, while the guy can go out and gallivant and do what the hell he wants. But then you find out that maternal instinct really kicks it in the end, and she ends up loving her baby. I mean, I'm grinning from ear to ear talking about it because I'm trying not to say too much. But it's to your point. What you said is so true. It's over a 2-hour film, and while it's not an action film, it's more of a thriller to me. This thing just keeps moving on, and I keep going. What's the twist? What's the gotcha? And you know what? It's just like you said, the terror of what happens with everything around you in modern day. It's phenomenal. It's the way a movie should be made to me.
Yep. Be quiet. You're in Dubrovnik. I can't hear you. That line, just that line lands. That's all I'll say. I won't go any further, but I'm just absolutely just gobsmacked by this movie. It's wonderful how they are able to go ahead and just fill this out. And I am really surprised because, you hear things, you do. And you're like, oh, okay. And sometimes there are movies that are just overrated. That happens. Not here. Not here. This is unsettling the whole way through, and it's wonderful just how you are on the edge of your seat. And then, without spoiling, just to say, the end, while it's a very good ending. I'm going to say that.
Funny.
Very bad ending, very good ending. It's a very good ending. And a lot of movies, I think they try to take something like this, especially when we talk about Hereditary or The Witch, or I guess Midsommar. I haven't fully seen that, just parts of it. But they try to be this, and they can't be. They want to be, and in their attempts, they make something truly just terrible. Like I really think those movies are bad movies.
Well, because they're not about horror. They're about a particular message of whatever. And I'll say as A24 being a distributor, and we've talked about what makes a great horror movie recently here on the Extreme Movie Show, just
Mhm.
jotting some ideas around. I think one of the interesting things just is that while we may not love Rosemary, we certainly understand her, and we can, emphasize with her what she's going through with having a child, and of course, relationships and all that too. So we're interested in it, and to me, when you have a studio that has a lot of young people with it, and they're out interested in that, they're not going, okay, how can I? What's the horror in this movie, and how can I present it, and how can I tell a story in a way that maximizes that through my characters or plot? A lot of them are done just like I said to be message movies, and so there's this term out there floating around for a while now called elevated horror,
Yeah.
where someone like a John Carpenter would go the opposite route and say, I was just trying to make an exploitative, quick, type of film.
And I really do want to talk about that because there are people that go ahead and they say like Psycho. Psycho is considered elevated horror. Alfred Hitchcock would never ever call his movie that. I don't think. Sorry, I was thinking about Hitchcock a minute. But that term is utterly useless, and it's just a bunch of critics trying to make themselves feel better about themselves for watching these shit films. Um,
Well, whether you can agree with, like, say, the ending of this film, whether you think it's stupid, whether you think it's clever, whether you think it's appropriate. I think the humor in it is the horror that you go through, and how can you resolve a situation that Rosemary finds herself in with, her husband and everybody that is a part of her life, and comes into it really fast and furious. And sometimes it feels like you are overwhelmed. I mean, it's like the old expression: when you go to have a wedding, the wedding's not for you; it's for everybody else. And to me, I look at it and I go, again, the horror is it's all the shit that really does go around you when you're involved in these big situations or these big moments that everybody looks forward to. And the reality of them are much different than what you think of when you're young, and you idolize it. And to me, when you look at this elevated horror nonsense term, it's a way to kind of describe stuff, because it's so easy now to shoot a film to make it look good and do things and have beautiful people in it and stuff. But the bottom line is there's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new that a film could get some attention to now than before. So you don't have to try to reinvent the wheel when you're making a film, but you have to understand what horror is. And so when you take a movie like Midsommar, which I thought was absolutely wretched and horrible, one of the worst movies of that year, um, you can turn your audience off so much by not making you root for any of the characters, be interested in the plot. You've seen this movie before; it's just dressed up differently, and they just beat you over the head with it. And that's not to say you have to love it, but at the same time, too, you can take a movie that's like, to me, Hereditary, that I thought was interesting and a little bit clever, and despite that, like, you're not a fan of it, and I thought it was a very good
no.
film, even though I think it's by the same director. It's different, and I think finding a way to do horror in today's terms, everybody wants to be safe. Nobody wants to really challenge anything that's taboo or whatever. It's hard to really say what scares people, and so you go back to this movie that's over 50 years old, and the human condition is always going to be the same. How do things affect you from the outside? And the change that it has on you is the study. That's what makes it interesting, and that's why we always say here on Extreme Movie Show, or at least I do, that the character part of it definitely matters. The story can suck. It could be a nothing story. But if you like the character, you just want to watch what they go on. And what you said, I still think is the best description tonight. This over 2 hour movie flew by. It felt like you just could not fast forward a minute, because in every scene, there's something that goes, oh my God, here's another clue, and here's another one, and here's another one. Oh, something is going on with the color. I guess that's a theme through it. Oh, here's something on with the herbs. That's something going on with it. The calendar, all sorts of things too. It's phenomenal, and a lot of little details like that. If you go to watch it again, you can pick up on it when you're watching with a different eye, and that's the joy of somebody that's a skillful filmmaker like this: is focus on the human condition, dress your story up in such a way where maybe you have a little inside humor for it. If that pops you, that's great. Or a smart watcher, or somebody that can catch things on a second or third watch. and you've succeeded. And this movie does such a great job of making you feel claustrophobic and paranoid towards the end that you go, yeah, I guess that's kind of how it is. And I agree with you. Whether it's A24 or Boomhouse or whatever, where's the really good horror at? It's tough to find it these days.
Yeah. And as much as I would love to say that we could see something like this again, it's going to be a while, because when it comes to horror movies, I think the ones that are easiest to get right are in terms of like slashers. You can get a slasher right fairly easily. And you don't even have to make all the characters likable, because like even with the original Halloween, everybody but everybody but Jodie sucks. But when it comes to movies like this, we have one person to actually hook onto, and we're going through their journey. You're right. You do have to make that person likable. And this woman, you feel for her throughout this. You do empathize with her, and you are fighting for her. Like, you want her to succeed. You want her to find someone to help. And when you find out just how deeply rooted this coven is throughout New York, you are
Yes.
just, you feel the betrayal that she has, and that is everything that it should be.
Well, it's
Oh,
that classic up against the system kind of thing, and I think it triggers something in us on a primal level that we see a woman, and I think the casting is great because some people might say she's ugly. I think she's got a great look, and she's a very petite lady, very um,
I,
dainty, and I think she actually looks fantastic. And because she's not fragile, but you go, oh my God, she's pregnant and she's this and that. All of a sudden, those instincts of you as a
mhm,
father or husband, you just want to kick in, and you feel that when you're watching this too.
yes.
It's not it's the biggest thing that can happen in somebody's life, having a child.
I want to go ahead, and I don't want to spend too long talking about, oh, whether or not she's attractive or not. I think she is very attractive when she's not being put on simple makeup. What you were talking about before of how ill she looks, it's very simple makeup.
Yes.
They just make her look so pale and tired, and it's because of her size, because of how petite she is, all that, it comes into play. It's so simple. And they cut off her hair. They make her have this short haircut, and that's when it starts making her look even more unhealthy. The scene, and I'm going to touch upon this dinner party. She's eating, I guess, cranberry that's like sticking out of the cooked turkey. She's just eating it, and she looks into the reflection of a toaster, I believe.
Yeah.
It She looks almost monstrous. She's so ghastly, and she recognizes that, and that's when she's like, no, she's like shaking away from it. And it's so simple. It's so simple. Why can't anybody else do this?
Because they try to be clever, and
Yeah,
I'll close with this. I mean, we obviously spent a couple hours on this easy, so we just wanted to touch on it because it was basically our highlight for the month of October, wanting to do this film. So I'm glad you got a chance to watch it. This is a film that if you like any kind of films or like horror films, or even if you don't, I would say this is really is the standard for it because honestly, it's not very gory, it's not very wretched. There might be some imagery that you could argue a person would find disturbing, and understandably, those of us that in the middle age or older category understood at the time how sinister it may seem, especially compared to the kind of stuff that's on Netflix and everywhere else today, how commonplace this material is. So for its time, it's definitely very cutting edge. But again, I just from a film perspective, I got to argue that not only is it crafted very well, it does a great job of stirring up these emotions in you, even though it's been 30 plus years since I've originally seen the film. Every time on rewatch, I go, "Damn, this thing is fantastic!" And it's you could put it in a time capsule, and you could say, "What's the short list of horror movies?" And for me, of all timers, this is definitely up there. I think it's
absolutely.
incredible. I think it's a masterpiece, and it all goes back to that simple art of storytelling about the human part to it, and it always comes down to that. And again, if you haven't seen it, check it out. If you haven't seen it in a long time, and you want to compare it to stuff that we've reviewed here, some schlock and other stuff, it's definitely worth it because it definitely allows you, I think, the opportunity to kind of compare and contrast some of the things. Then you realize, yeah, if all the films out today are kind of similar, did they used to be different? Yeah, now that might open your eyes to something that gives you a little bit more taste or appreciation for how they can be done. And I agree with you. They're few and far between, but that's why we talk about them. I think It Follows, like I said, was one of the last really, really good ones recently, and that was almost 10 years ago. But we'll talk more horror movies as the years go by here on the Xtreme Movie Show. Any other final thoughts from you, Professor Pixel, on Rosemary's Baby?
If you have not seen this film, you need to. Do not wait. Do not be me. Be better than me. Go out there.
Much better than anything else that's come out in at least a
Yes.
decade or so, horror film wise. Not even close.
Yes.
It's not really.
2 thumbs up. I wish I had a third hand to go ahead and give it one more.
Yeah, I wanted to give a special shout out to DVD Daddy. He's obviously a big fan, like Ed, Maranya, and everybody else there too. He's obviously, I sent this out last minute. We were going to do it private offline. I said, you know what, let's just go live and talk about it for a few minutes, get everybody's appetite a little bit wet. But I wanted to let everybody know that we're going to be going live here shortly. For Revenge of Frankenstein, the second in the Frankenstein films by Hammer Horror. We're going to stop at that, transition to other things too, but we wanted to get that one in. So I wanted to thank everybody for showing up tonight on such a short notice, checking out Rosemary's Baby. I wanted to thank Professor Pixel for coming in tonight. A lot of fun. Man, this gets me excited, and this is why we do what we do here on the Xtreme Movie Show. For everybody else, I'm your host, Rob here. Have a good night, and as always, stay extreme.